In Season 1, Episode 3 of the aptly named Community, one of the main characters of the college-based sitcom, Abed, is sad that he can't study film. His father won't pay for the class, but one of the other students feels bad and wants to help Abed. She kindly pays for him to be able to take the class. Abed then comically creates scenarios to create a film that portrays how he feels in his relationship with his father, and more deeply, his family. He manipulates his friends and acts like a complete weirdo, all to create a documentary about himself.
I'll have to make some adjustments to my film. Jeff, I think you should play the role of my father.
I don't want to be your father.
It's perfect, you already know your lines.
When he finally finishes the film, he shows it to his father and friends. His friends don't really seem to care or get what is happening, but his dad has burst into tears. His dad, in previous scenes, is shown as closed off, mean, and definitely unsupportive of his son.
Fine. You want to raise him? You raise him. I'm out.
However, now we see him in a vulnerable state, and for the first time, he understands his son.
His son is hard to understand. If making movies help him be understood, then I pay for the class.
What Abed couldn't ever do with words, he was able to accomplish with film, with art. What is art? In most people's attempts to define art, they get bogged down by what things aren't art, and they try and pinpoint an exact measurement of what can be defined as art. But art is a naturally creative, progressive, and status quo challenging thing. So if you tell someone one thing is an art, the artistic thing to do in that situation is often to make art to challenge that. Especially modern art has been a lot about challenging the old academies and what people try and make art out to be. Marcel Duchamp is an obvious example with his beautiful piece, Fountain. And this has led people to argue art is just a construct, which we'll get into later. Defining art is a treacherous path, one that at every point is going to have someone pushing against you. There is no one definition of art that will be satisfying to everyone. But I am going to try and do that anyways, and I hope that even if you disagree, even if most people disagree, the conversation will at least be fruitful. A lot of what I say might be obvious, but at the same time, I'm sure there's a lot of people who haven't thought about art in this way before. I know I hadn't until this past year. I hope at the very least I can just build on some people's ideas of art. Sadly, defining is a dreadful process, one that can take the truth and magic out of words.
In respect to art, formal definitions leave us cold. By the time we arrive at them, the elements that stirred the blood and aroused admiration in the concrete have vanished.
Most of the time, defining something just feels like losing the sense of the actual word rather than acquiring some truth. But for the sake of trying to communicate something deeply real, I'm gonna risk it. Okay, enough horsing around, let's define art. Art is communication. The process of any art piece, the thing that defines painting, singing, writing, dancing, and any other art form is communication. Communication is the process going on here. In the community example, what happened was a clear moment of understanding, of seeing someone for the first time. Art breaks down barriers. It can give you newfound empathy for people you couldn't possibly understand before. Art can portray the world from someone else's point of view. It gives you this rare insight, if the art is made well enough, to actually be in someone else's shoes. The question to challenge this, I guess, is it art if no one sees it? Because the gut reaction is like, of course that's still art. For me, this question is kind of the wrong way of looking at it though, because it presupposes that art is just an object. In my opinion, without a person or a subject, you can't have art. Most obviously, you can't have an artist, but you also have no one to perceive the art. There's no pressing reason to create. Maybe you would still do it to have fun, but it's not like you're going to take art as seriously. Also, the process of art needs an ending. I don't believe art is a forever continuing process like George Lucas does. At some point, you need an ending. And without a presentation, without someone actually looking at it, I don't think the art is properly finished. I mean, you don't put on a show, performance, or post a video just for the heck of it. You do it to share and communicate. It's about other people, at least to a certain extent. But ultimately, to answer the question, I think it's still an art piece. But I think art is more than just an art piece. The way I think about art, informed by Art as Experience by Mr. John Dewey, is like, you got this person, this artist, and then you have an art object made by the artist, and then you have the subject, the person perceiving it. The communication goes from the artist to the audience through the art object. When I heard this, I was like, oh yeah, that's exactly what art is. That's exactly how it feels. The question then becomes how much of the meaning of art has to be intended by the artist, but that's a big can of worms, and I might get into that some other time with my buddy Neil Breen. Art is a language, a special language that can communicate what words cannot. Art is imbued with meaning from the artist. This meaning is then hopefully communicated to the audience. This is why, in my opinion, one of the most objective ways of judging art is through what it communicates. Did the art piece communicate anything? If so, how well did it communicate that? The communication also needs to be peculiar and unique. Art is not interested in the general themes of being sad or being happy. It's interested in depicting certain and precise feelings, not just in emotion, but a very specific emotional reaction. If you're painting a tree, it's not about the species of tree. It's not about trees as a concept. It's about this very specific tree you're painting.
If all meanings could be adequately expressed by words, the arts of painting and music would not exist. There are values and meanings that can be expressed by only immediately visible and audible qualities. And to ask what they mean in the sense of something that can be put into words is to deny their distinctive existence.
This John Dewey quote has been immensely impactful for me. When I read it for the first time, it was as if I struck gold. At this point, I've been obsessed with art and aesthetic philosophy and all that hippie stuff for a year now. And then I read this quote. This quote is all I've wanted to express about art. I had a spiritual experience in September of 2023, and I wanted to explain the experience to others, but no matter what, I couldn't. I felt like I couldn't adequately do so because of this fact. I had my experience while watching a YouTube video about Arrival. This video, and then further when I actually watched Arrival, couldn't be expressed through words. I couldn't express the meaning of words because, of course, the only way to actually adequately explain the experience is by interacting with the art object that caused it. I read Art as Experience a couple months ago, around 1 year after my spiritual experience. This quote felt like the answer to all my inquiries and exploration into the art world. What was the point of art? Why can't I get art ideas and objects and philosophies out of my head? Because of the meanings that couldn't be expressed through words, the deep truths that only art has uncovered for me. Because art is such a beautiful, rich way of communication. I've now discussed why art is communication, but this goes deeper. Art, in my opinion, is not only communication, it is essential for community at large. Art is interwoven with the core aspects of community. To have a community, at least in real life, you need a building, meeting grounds, communal areas for the variety of things needed in a community. Architecture is such a fundamental building block for community. A beautiful environment can allow a community to thrive. That's like the most baseline thing that art does for a community, but it goes so much deeper than that. Singing, music, dancing, all essential components of many cultures and communities around the world. It's crazy that half this stuff only happens in like churches and clubs nowadays. Of course, you also have the many different artistic tasks that a community might need. It's hard to be specific because there are just so many different types of communities. But, for example, you might want to have photographer, coders, people who can play instruments, people who can do well with interior or exterior design. If this community is based on like your neighborhood, the amount of different niches and ways artists can build and help the community grows exponentially. It all depends on your community and situation, but really no matter what, you're going to need some artistry. Then there's also the art for communities to engage with that aren't even directly made by the community itself. For example, games, which is a very valid art form and are great for community building and ice breaking and just connecting to others. Music, movie nights, discussing different new pieces of art can be great for connecting to certain communities, or great for building relationships with specific people. Besides work, it kind of seems like any place with a community has this need to create art. For example, schools have band or drama, and churches have Christmas pageants and worship. And if you're Catholic or Orthodox, you also have architectural merit. Okay, so art is clearly important for community, but community is also extremely important for art. If it weren't for community, art would be harder to access. And that's why I would say in recent years we've had a huge loss in access to art. Not in the way of programs or hardware. I mean, you can literally have your phone camera and a free editing software like DaVinci make like a movie. You can make a movie with that. A movie. But the problem lies in the essence of why people make art. I'm gonna say a video essayist thing, so just a warning, but basically this is all capitalism and social media's fault. First of all, people have been losing access to community, a place where they can meet other people to help them and inspire them. Without community to foster talent, talent will be lost. People have also grown up in a world where content is the norm, and children want to be YouTubers. And I'm telling you right now, wanting to be a YouTuber or TikToker is stupid. You need to have something interesting about yourself that isn't YouTube to do YouTube. So like, get a personality first and then maybe reconsider the whole YouTuber thing. But what this means is a lot of artistic effort has gone into content slop instead of actually something beautiful. Art also takes dedication to a craft and years of practice and effort. Social media has made it easy to waste time and not develop skills needed for art. And with AI, people think they can just skip the hard part and type in prompts, but that's not real art. Art is communication. If art is communication, then the most vital thing for healthy art making and enjoying is community. There is a reason tons of online community form around a particular artistic creation or an artistic hobby. If you are an artist who is struggling, the best advice I can give you is find someone else to talk about art to. Even if it's just listening to them talk about art online, that can still be helpful. But it's best to find someone you can drone on to about all the art ideas you want to make. Art is always better in community. Art will be better when you have friends who understand the craft and can critique you more proficiently. Art will be better when you have people waiting for you to make stuff. Art will be better when you have mentors, peers, friends, rivals, and people in your life. The idea of the lone artist cracking away at some glorious piece to prove they weren't wasting their time is such a dumb, stupid one. How will you ever have the motivation to keep that going? And even if you did, would the art even be good if you weren't trying to communicate anything to anyone? Other people are the solution to perfectionism. Other people are the solution to when you're making the same thing over and over again. Other people is the solution to when you aren't feeling good about art. There is a beauty in knowing someone else is invested in your artistic life and being invested in someone else's. You will learn from seeing others, and by helping others, you will help yourself. Art is also better appreciated with other people. Because art is communication, when people share a love for a specific piece of art, it actually means something about those two people. It actually means you share something in common. A lot of people will just say, it doesn't matter if you disagree about this movie or that song. It's just your opinion, man. And like, yes, to a certain extent, please don't lose friends over art appreciation. But if an art piece struck my soul, and then someone says they didn't like the art piece, I feel like they don't like my soul. The reverse is also true. When I hear someone else say that they love a piece that I love, I feel warm inside. I feel connected to this other person. Not only does this make me enjoy the art more, it also makes me enjoy humanity more. Art and community enhance one another. I think there are three main pathways to meaning in life. Art and community are two of the ways. Art can connect you to other people, and it brings transcendent emotions. It can be a way to communicate who you are and feel meaning through that. Even if you don't make art, it can be a way to relate to others. I must admit, I'm definitely biased here as I'm obsessed with art and I do consider myself an artist, but still. And then community is literally the meaning of everything. Other people define your journey. Caring and having others in your life makes it harder to get all existential about nothing mattering. At the end of the day, if you don't have other people in your life, it's very hard to feel a meaning. The third thing that can bring great meaning is religion. Religion can make you feel meaningful in the universe, but it also has like this meaninglessness quality to it, similar to an existential crisis. At least for me. The meaninglessness comes because you are facing God and the totality of the universe, just being one small part of this whole thing. Of course you would feel like almost nothing. I would say this meaninglessness is then contradicted at the notion of being connected to this universe, to God. The sublime feeling connects you to the larger whole, and I think that's extremely important. Religion's way of connection is unique enough to where I'm not entirely sure you can get it anywhere else, but I would say you could still have meaning without religion. I actually think that these sublime feelings are possible to get from art and nature, and they are accessible to people who are not in a religious position. But religion puts you in a context to understand the sublimity more properly. It also provides a more personal connection to this God or totality. It's worth noting, I believe community to be more important than both art and religion, but I think in order to understand and appreciate any three of these things, you need the other two. You need to understand all of them. Or if you're an atheist, at least understand the historical significance of religion. So I'm gonna go more in depth on religion, which is definitely a topic that will rub some people the wrong way. To be extra clear, I want to tell you my current position on religion and just say right off the bat, I'm not trying to convert you. I made a 40-minute video on my spiritual experience, and that video is still one of my best. But basically, I was a Christian growing up. Then at 14, I became an atheist. Then I was an atheist and anti-theist for a minute. Then I stopped being an anti-theist. And then I had a spiritual experience and seriously doubted my atheism for the first time in 5 years. Then I was kind of agnostic for a while. And now I would say I'm a person who believes in God and kinda, sorta Jesus. But most of that doesn't matter for this video. Again, I'm not trying to convert you or convince you to believe in God. I want to talk about how religion is important in art and how community is important in religion and all the different connections. So let's begin. Art has rode on the back of religion for most of history. Architecture, painting, music, writing were all brought to insane heights through religion. I'm speaking mostly of Christianity here, but that's just because I grew up Christian. Muslim art and Buddhist art are also absolutely astounding, and I'm sure many other religions have great artistic merit. Despite it riding the back of religion, I think art has actually done as much for religion as religion has for art. The Bible is a foundation of Christian thought, and it's a book. Book is art, so like the foundation of Christianity is like based on art? Some might argue that point, but I would say the Bible is attempting to communicate something just like any other art piece does. I would also say though, it goes deeper than just the Bible. When the question is, how do you communicate God? The answer is probably going to be art. God cannot be explained through rational processes. Science will never prove God's existence. The reason Christians keep losing every argument is this insane focus on defending creationism and God as this entirely rational, scientific being. If God is actually what Christians claim him to be, then God would be beyond logic and rationality and science. Not to say that he would be irrational or that science would contradict God, but that he would just be beyond those concepts. I never knew God from arguments. The thing is, art and science both provide truth, just different elements and flavors of truth. Art is another way of knowing, another way of looking at the world, as opposed to the usual scientific and logical ways of belief. Art is the only way of understanding God's existence to me, or for me personally. The second I started seriously thinking about art is the second I started having spiritual experiences with it. I kept on having these unexplainably beautiful moments feeling God's presence. The sublime feeling I got from a video essay on Arrival actually convinced me to doubt my atheism. And then, upon deeper reflection, convinced me that I shouldn't be an atheist. 5 years of non-stop hardcore belief in atheism put to a stop by art. That's crazy. Also, it's kinda ironic considering Ted Chiang's an atheist, but whatever. But there are even more artistic elements of religion. Worship and prayer are the main ways people seek access to God, and while I won't speak on prayer yet, I will note, worship is art. Worship is actually an amazing artistic experience. I just got back from church. 'Twas great. And even though the songs aren't really in a genre I care for, and I'm not sure what true music tradition has to say about worship music, I can't help but love worship. What is so interesting to me is how church is such a vital artistic hub. It's weird. With all the pageants, singing, and architecture, it's so connected to art. It's a gateway to art. It has no doubt been an amazing way for young people to get their start in art. And it's such an ignored path to artistry with some good reasoning. I mean, I really do understand religious trauma. I have quite a bit of it myself. Hello, Hotel Connor here. I would just like to say another good reason for people to be skeptical of artistic merit in church is like how worship is often framed nowadays as like way too light showy, and like there's a lot of critique of modern worship, that some of which is definitely valid, other parts maybe not as valid. I don't know, but I just want to acknowledge that for the people who were thinking that. But the ways in which art and church interact is, in my opinion, a healthy part of even mainstream evangelicalism, as long as it's not some conservative cringe. I'm not talking about conservative art. I'm talking about just churchian, pure churchian art. Not to mention all the stuff that specifically Protestant Christianity doesn't do, like with all the crazy architecture and paintings. Going into Orthodox and Catholic churches is just such an interesting experience, and while it's culturally distant for me, when I step foot into these buildings, I feel like I understand the culture a little bit better. I instantly get a unique emotion. These churches communicate something. Art and religion are thus intertwined in an amazing way. But what's actually most interesting to me is how this all connects with community. And I don't think you can have religion or art, at least not in the way we think about it, without two people. At least two people. Without human relation, there is no point or no way to understand religion or art. Christianity is so attractive to me personally because of its emphasis on community. Churches are communities where the main thing you do is pray for one another and talk to each other. You also do communion together, remembering why you are there. Then the beauty of worship can be better emphasized here. It's art, but it's communal art. You sing together, like, dude, that should just be normal. You also all listen to someone preach. Everyone is interacting with new ideas on a regular basis. Churches are relatively similar to how they've been in the past. Huge emphasis on relatively. A lot of these things that would have just been normal outside of the church have been lost to time. Church is now one of the few modern ways of accessing all this good stuff. And churches should be taking advantage of that more than just complaining about trans people existing. Churches are often and should be involved in a community or the broader general community around the church. Churches are amazing places for people to ask for needs and often be blessed. In the church I go to, everyone always prays for each other, and I always think like, this is just the best. People need to be there for each other, and in modern times, it's not often that you have a place where you can just talk about your problems or what you're grateful for. Of course, a lot of engagement also really depends on the church you're actually going to. If you're at a mega church, good luck reaping any of these rewards that should be common in religion. Churches are a true third place, and they are one of the only few modern places that can claim that label. On Wikipedia, the definition of third places literally starts with churches as the first example, because it's one of the very few modern conceptions we have of this idea. You don't have to have any qualifications or pay money. You can just go to a church, and if it's a good church, it'll connect you to a semi-local community. If you don't know, third places refer to a place that isn't home, your first place, or work, your second place, but a place that you can go to where you can regularly connect with others. Generally speaking, it should be a place that you don't have to pay to access or to stick around, and it should be a place where you can interact with people you do know and you also might not know. Ideally, it should also be within walking distance. I mean, my church is upstairs, so that's a fun fact. But statistically, you're American and don't have access to that. But a shout out to all my European viewers who can walk to a third place. You're epic. Either way, generally speaking, libraries, cafes, and churches are the few last third places, or common third places. I think this is genuinely one of the reasons churchgoers are so much happier than non-churchgoers. In this social media driven world, people need connection, and church is a place for that. Cutting deeper into Christianity, there are so many core theological ideas that are very community pilled. For example, the Trinity, God is literally in community with himself. Other examples are, of course, loving your neighbor as yourself, nonviolence, other people being in the image of God, and prayer. Prayer is extraordinary, and while I don't really know too much theological stuff on prayer, from the way I understand it, prayer is literally your way of being in community with God. Talking with God is such an integral part of Christianity because Christianity is a community-based religion. This is why I find it so captivating and beautiful, and it's why I can't get it out of my head. It's why I pray even though I feel like I don't know what I'm doing. It's why I worship, do communion, and listen to sermons. Not just because I find this fun or something, it's because it rings so deeply true because of this community angle, because there is something so deeply beautiful about community, and religion embraces that. Okay, so I'm talking a lot about religion here, but religion is not the topic of this video. Art and community are both in the title, probably, depending on what I title this thing. Religion is not in the title. However, religion is probably the most illuminating way of looking at art and community. And I don't think it's easy to talk about art as communication without bringing up religion. Religious feeling is such a constitutive element of art. What art does is communicate reality, a deep part of reality that is uncommunicable through other means. This is why, in my opinion, art is so good at showing off religion, because the true parts of religion are also at this deep part of reality. The job of an artist is often to communicate and capture that deep truth. It's interesting that God's presence for me is mostly accessible through art, which I believe just to be other regular people's communication. I think this is partially because certain things can only be communicated through art, including other people's conceptions of God. Well, like I said, Ted Chiang, the guy who wrote this book and did the Arrival thing, is an atheist. So like, what the heck? Well, I did watch a video essayist talk about Arrival, and they were coming at it from a Christian perspective, so that's kind of maybe part of it. I think what the video essayist CJ did was look at Arrival through the lens of their Christianity, and I accepted the entirety of that. But I have had spiritual experiences with art that were definitely not meant to communicate God. Like, for example, Winter, The Wind Can Be Still, from the Stardew Valley OST. It made me cry multiple times throughout my journey to perfection, which I did accomplish, so you could kind of say I'm an epic gamer. I also only looked up 5 things I kind kind of slayed. I don't think that Concerned Ape, the Stardew Valley developer, was intending for God to be communicated through one of his random winter songs, but it happened. And then the same thing happened with The Bear, Season 2, Episode 6, Forks. The second time I watched it, I felt bliss. And again, entirely not about God. Then I felt this way more with music, books, TV shows, and movies. Now it is genuinely not weird for me to have spiritual feelings while observing art, experiencing art. Recently, even video games had jumped in on the trend. I mean, I know I just talked about a video game, but that was a song. That's different. Outer Wilds, which I was convinced to play because of one of my comments on my previous video, also gave me a lot of spiritual feelings. So this is where I might start to tread into I'm a crazy person territory, but this is because I think art is real and it's a way to access the eternal or God. This religious feeling goes deep to the core of art, and even though it makes me feel like I'm a crazy person, other people note this phenomenon as well.
A work of art elicits and accentuates this quality of being a whole, and of belonging to the larger, all-inclusive whole, which is the universe in which we live. This fact, I think, is the explanation of that feeling of exquisite intelligibility and clarity we have in the presence of an object that is experienced with aesthetic intensity. It explains also the religious feeling that accompanies intense aesthetic perception.
This religious feeling of being a part of a whole is what I felt in my spiritual experience with Arrival. I felt so completely in awe of the universe, but I also felt a part of it somehow. I understood I had my role to play. It was exactly as John Dewey describes it. It was clarity. The way art communicates is through clarity. Art clears a path to understanding. Art is beautiful and true. It's not beauty just for the sake of prettiness and vibes. It's fucking real. So I just said, art is beautiful and true. The phrase blank is beautiful and true sounds kind of vague, cliche, and maybe even a bit too sincere for some people. Despite that, this phrase has defined my exploration into the art world and has changed how I view art. At first, I just kept on hearing it in books about art and books in general, and video essays and YouTube thumbnails, and I don't know, it just stuck with me every time. It felt so profound, and every time I saw it, I remember thinking, I have to do like a deep dive video essay on this, because I'd never actually heard anyone discuss this, like what they were actually like meeting in more exact terms. The phrase doesn't seem to have an origin, at least not from the small amount of research, small amount of Googling I did. Kind of just looks like different people made it up independently or just heard about it from one random thing. But when I noticed the pattern, I was quite intrigued. The phrase doesn't have to be talking about art. It can also be something talking about the beauty of something that is more conventionally true, like science or math. Like that math equation, it's so beautiful and true, but I like to read it primarily in a way about art. I also find it interesting to talk about it in order of it, like importance. Whatever thing is talked about is actually beautiful, then true. Beauty actually supersedes truth in some way. Or maybe the beauty is so powerful it feels like discovering the truth or meaning of the universe. This way of thinking highlights beauty as being reason enough to believe art is true, as more real than just a concept or construct. I don't think art is just a construct. I think it's beautiful and true. It's also true that you don't need to think of it in a way that makes one of these more important. It's just the way that I read it sometimes. Art is a universal language that can communicate truth. It is fundamental to community and religion for communicating the truth of community and religion. Oh my gosh, that was too many communes. It isn't something I feel has meaning just because of a bias that I have or because art has changed my opinion. It deserves my respect because It has built amazing things for communities, religious and non-religious alike. I'm gonna admit, ironically, I feel pretty alone in this journey. Part of the reason I'm making this video is because of that. I mean, sure, a lot of people agree with a lot of what I've said, but no one in my life seems to share this passion, at least not like I do. Maybe it's just my ADHD obsessionness, which is fine. I don't expect them to. It's just meant I've relied more on parasocial and online relationships for this very important part of my life. And that's been hard. I don't know. I thought if I made this, maybe more people like me would exist. I don't know. Maybe that's too hopeful, but that's at least how I'm looking at it at this point.
Art is the extension of the power of rites and ceremonies to unite men through a shared celebration to all incidents and scenes of life. This office is the reward and seal of art. That art weds man and nature is a familiar fact. Art also renders men aware of their union with one another in origin and destiny.
In the very beginning of this video, I talked about art's unique qualities, its status quo challenging behavior. This individuality is often one of the core messages of art, and it's important. This language is meant for expression and to communicate who you are. But I think there's a fragment of art that can get left out when you look at that too hard. Art can be used to connect you through that expression. You can become closer, more loving, and more understanding to others through art. Art can and should lead you to making connections, whether it be from shared love of the craft, working on projects together, or just having a movie night and enjoying a movie together, or singing in the car, or just a song. Or it can be also this weird religious thing, understanding spirituality and connecting to others through that. Art and community are interlinked, and it's hard to isolate them. I feel like what I have seen is that these gooey, fluid definitions have proven to be a bit too much. It's hard not to look at community, religion, and art as these entirely separate things. But sometimes the most truth I can gather from them is by looking at them together as a totality, each with their own role, but ultimately connected. Yeah, I'm a crazy person. Cheers. Thanks for watching this one. I really hope it's Halloween when you're watching this, probably, or near Halloween or whatever, when I post this. Cheers. Cheers. Did I say cheers? I don't know. And sub to the Patreon if you want to be an absolute epic crazy person. Yes. Enough yapping. Bye.
It's not exactly Citizen Kane.